Good morning. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Minneapolis Audit Committee for Tuesday, March 21st. My name is Lene Palmisano. I'm chair of this committee. And with me here at the dais are the following committee members. We have Mr. David Fisher. We have Vice Chair Mr. Scott Neal, Councilmember John Quincy, and Commissioner Walensky. Um, Councilmember Kano will be joining us shortly, but please let the record reflect that we have a quorum and we can get started. Colleagues, we have a short agenda today, and it's mostly about updates, and then we will be moving to a closed session to discuss the auditor's annual review, followed by a workshop for committee members, a strategy session of sorts. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as it's in front of you?
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded to adopt the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. First, we need to accept the minutes from our last meeting, which was January 10th of 2017. So I'll move adoption of those minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and the minutes are adopted. Item number 3 on our agenda today is regarding an amendment to the 2017 annual audit plan. The language before you amends the work plan to include an analysis of what we know as Results Minneapolis. I want to share the intention with this amendment is to update the annual work plan, so it directs the audit department to analyze it and look for potential areas of improvement. It's a bit of a program audit. So I'd like to move this. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and this motion passes. I just want to make another comment under new business. I don't want to make a motion at this time. I want to acknowledge we've been hearing a lot from constituents, a former council president, a former governor, and a state senator about issues related to the U.S. Bank Stadium, and specifically to Audit's role in possibly looking into issues related to the Viking Stadium. Of course, I wasn't here when the stadium was voted on, but because of the questions we're getting from constituents and because of recent developments with MSFA leadership changes and all the issues surrounding the stadium, the parking garage, and the park, with more details coming out seemingly daily, I just think it's important to bring up and evaluate if there's something there that this committee and or our internal audit department should look at as it relates to the city's ongoing involvement in the stadium. A staff direction was passed by the council back in December along these lines, and we'll wait on that report before this committee takes action. I just want to say this is something my office is monitoring, and we may bring forward something in the future. Because of the independence of the internal auditor, there may be a role for us to play here to make sure reports related to the stadium are objective and our analysis of ongoing obligations are done in a way that protects the public interest. So again, I don't want to take action at this time, but I needed to mention that just to say we'll continue to monitor these issues. With that, let's move to a report from the Internal Audit Department's work in progress. Here to present that is the Director of Internal Audit, Mr. Tetzel.
Good morning, Madam Chair, council members. My name is Will Tetzel. I'm the city auditor. And just to walk you through our brief agenda today, I'll give you an update on the progress of our audit plan and then hand it over to Steve McDaniel to go through state auditor findings and audit remediations update. So on our plan so far this year, we have a number of projects that we've initiated, and then we still have about 4 that we haven't started yet. So projects that we've initiated are police property and evidence room audit, which is in its wrapping up field work stage and beginning reporting stage. So that one will be ready for the next audit committee meeting. We've started a workers' compensation audit, so we're in the planning phase of that. We have continued our police records management system implementation, and we're in the planning phase for that. The contracts are in place, and the implementation is beginning this year, so we'll get much more involved with the police department in a consultative manner and working with our outsourced IT auditors. We think there's some pretty interesting areas where we could add some value to the police department there. There's an interesting time frame involved because we have the Super Bowl looming next winter, and so it's either can we get this done well before the Super Bowl, enough to get people trained and understand how to use this new system that'll be, the overarching sort of enterprise system for the police department, or if things are trailing off like they quite often do with system implementations, do we push it off and wait for after the Super Bowl? They don't want it to start in the middle or put anything at risk for that. And the next is we've kicked off some third-party audits with IT. So we're looking at OneNeck. If you'll remember, OneNeck took over some of the work that Unisys used to do in that space. The city took over some as well, like Service Desk. So we'll be looking at OneNeck and a couple other of those key vendors. Our IT co-source partners have a lot of experience doing IT, like vendor audits, and so they have programs set up in place, and we can really pick and choose modules from those programs to plug into some of those vendors depending on what they do and where we are in that maturity model with them. OneNeck is still relatively new, so there's some things that are still shaping. We won't really touch those areas. We'll focus on the ones that are a little more in place and those high risk sections of those. Projects that are planned for this year that we haven't started yet, the payroll fraud audit. We did commit to get, because this is really data heavy, we committed to get our data requests to both the Park and Rec Board leadership team and the payroll department within the city about 2 months before we want to start that audit. So they have plenty of time to get all that information together. This is just going to be a lot of data analysis. And so we want to make sure they have plenty of time to get that all put together. So we'll start working on our requirements there and then get that to them. So we can probably start that in late summer, early fall, which is a good time for payroll. We don't want to start early because they have all the year-end stuff and we don't want to do it too late. So in talking with the deputy CFO, that seemed like a good time of the year to do that work. Next, off-street parking. You'll remember this being on the audit plan last year. This is really a review of that contract. It's one of the largest contracts in the city. Service level agreements, identifying certain risks in there, ensuring that the vendor we use for that is doing their job right, and any obligations the city has under that contract that we're prepared and able to do those. The next is a third-party audit. This one's still a little bit ambiguous. Once we determine the third party that we're choosing to audit, we'll announce that probably by the next audit committee meeting. But we're looking through spend and contracts and stuff like that to determine where we think that our work would be best suited. And lastly, police body camera readiness. So we did the same thing last year with license plate reader. There was state legislation around biannual audit requirements of both the license plate reader data and police body camera data. So we're going in beforehand to make sure that we feel like the police department and IT and whomever else is involved has everything tied up and is working well, so we don't have any issues with those audits. So helping them get ready for those and make sure that we don't have any problems that we need to report to the state on. Any questions on the audit plan? And then we clearly will have the results Minneapolis work that we'll add to this as well.
Any questions? No.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Steve McDaniel to walk through the state auditor findings and remediations follow-up on all of our audit work.
Thank you. Mr. McDaniel, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Audit Committee. My name is Steve McDaniel, and I'm a Senior Internal Auditor in the Internal Audit Department. I'll be providing you an update on the status of the state auditor findings, the internal audit remediations, and I'll be showing you a few new items as well. As a reminder, our internal audit reports contain findings. Those findings include several recommendations to which the client responds to. We then follow up on those responses. One of my roles here with the internal audit department is to manage the follow-up process. And in managing this follow-up process, I've put together a calendar that shows how we're going to be performing follow-up. There's a few key dates out there, and this is just an example calendar, and this is a process that we plan to follow 3 times a year and report back to the audit committee. The process begins with sending out emails, setting up meetings with the clients to find out where those remediations stand. We give the client about 2 weeks to respond. There's an extra week built in just in case some people end up being a little slow. And then we review that information. We give ourselves about a week to review that information. And then we give ourselves one last week to put together the audit committee slides to update the detailed remediations that are provided in a separate PowerPoint. And then we update the ACL GRC tool that the internal audit department uses, and we update a spreadsheet then as well. So that's the follow-up process that has been put together, and we plan on performing this about 3 times a year then.
Thank you. Just as you switch to the next slide, I just want to mention that this seems rather elementary, but this is just being really upfront and showing that here's how we will follow up on these. It says things like send emails, but what we mean there is we're going to reach out in a documented way
Mhm.
to contact, and this is kind of the discipline that we're getting into and we expect. So thank you. I appreciate
Yep,
this.
sounds good. As far as the state auditor findings go, you'll see on this slide as well as on the next slide for the Park and Rec that all of the 2015 state auditor findings have been corrected. We do not validate those findings, but we'll find out in the next state auditor's report for the 2016 report that if those findings actually have been corrected or not. There may be instances where there may be a variation of a finding, and at that point, the finding will continue on, or it may be proven that the finding was not corrected. But what we do is we report back to the audit committee on the current status of those state auditor findings. And so there's the city findings. All 6 of those findings have been corrected, and all of the 4 Park and Rec findings have been corrected based on conversations with the park board and with the city's finance department then.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. We also didn't see information like this 2 years ago, so this is great.
Sounds good. And the last item that we have put together is a table of the internal audit remediations. This is a table that you've seen previously. It does have a few new columns that I can go over then as well. We used to just start off by saying the remediations that are open, what's been closed, and then what remains open. What we've decided to do this time around is to show where progress is being made as far as the progress from the client. So that's the second column you'll see there, where remediations deemed closed by the client then. And then the next column is when the internal audit department actually validates those remediations. And so there will be instances where the client says they've completed something, but if they haven't been able to provide us the proof that that's been corrected, we're going to leave it as still open. And there may also be times where the information they provided isn't quite what we were looking for then, so we'll continue to follow up with them until we have deemed that those remediations have been corrected then. You'll see there's also years in for when the audits start, or when the audits were reported to the audit committee. So there's 2 2013 audits that are still out there that are from the prior internal audit team, and then moving forward 2015 through 2017 are the current team's audit reports.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yep.
Just to clarify, the reason why these columns wouldn't add up,
Right, yeah, the math is not what you would
it's
prefer to
because
see.
it goes over a calendar year, is that?
So the math there with looking at, let's do the records management audit addendum, for example, where there's 3 remediations that were open at the beginning of the year. 2 of them were deemed closed by the client, but they haven't provided the information. So we'll say that the client said that those have been completed, but since we don't have the information, we can't close them out. So it'll be the 3 minus 0 is still equals 3. So that's where the numbers line up there. But yes, for the 2013, yes, that is correct. There's still one remediation still open. And
Okay.
so we have separate slides for the city as well as the park board then as well. There's only one park board report, but there's the reason that we have the HR file maintenance and retention audit out there is because there's components of that audit that also pertain to the park board then. So that was a city audit, but then there's also a couple of remediations that the park board is taken care of as well. And then the last audit on there was presented at the last audit committee meeting then. So all in all, there are 11 reports that we're currently following up on with the remediations with the clients. There were 73 remediations open at the beginning of the year, 5 have been closed. So there's still 68 that remain open then. That concludes my presentation on the update on the remediations then. And do you have any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? I do just want to acknowledge a couple of things. One is that we have with us here, we have Christian Rummelhoff and his team. And last week, it was considered Sunshine Week across the country. And one of the major aspects of remediation that they've been working on since the information governance audit has been how do we make sure that when there is an open data request, that it is followed through by different departments across the enterprise. And it's been work that has pretty much taken a year, and then we codified it in the last council meeting in information governance ordinance. That is some of the work that started back here in audit committee. It's a lot of policy work and reorganizing how our city works on open data requests. And you guys in the audience have done such a great job and such a huge lift there. Then we were able to put it into an ordinance so that it is like that forevermore, so that we have a clear path. There's clear accountability across the city when an open data request comes in as to who owns it, that it's important and we need to fill it, and we get it back out to the public requester. So I wanted to share with you up here that that's some of the work that that stems from audit and is important for audit to be involved in. And also thank the people from the city clerk's office here for doing all of that for us. Other questions? Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'll turn it back over to Will Tetzel.
Madam Chair, that is all we have for you today.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any announcements? Announcements? Okay. Then I will move to adjourn this meeting to room 315 for purposes of discussing our internal auditor's annual review. So moved.
Second.
Do we have all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. See you in a few minutes.